When me and my friends were about 15, we used to go camping in the woods by our houses. A place called the Punchy that was pretty close to an old church and graveyard, but far enough not to creep you out. Well, anyway, we used to take 2 tents, and obviously not telling our parents, we would steal beer to take with us. This one time in particular, a few girls from school came with us, so they naturally lied about where they would be. Anyway, the story goes, we were getting drunk and playing dares, typical teen stuff, sitting around a fire with logs as seats. It's getting pretty late, and so some people had gone home, but there was still about 4 boys and 3 girls, including myself. It's dark now, probably about 10 p.m., and we had split up into the 2 tents. We were still drinking and playing dares that revolved around kissing and telling truths. This is when I hear footsteps coming from the trees outside the tents. I found this weird, and so I stuck my head through the opening, but there was nothing there. This really weirded me out, but I forgot about it about 5 minutes later. That's when it happens again. I look, but again, there's nothing. Yeah, now it's beginning to really weird me out. I ask if anyone has noticed, and they all say no, so I'm thinking I'm drunk and hearing things. Next thing I hear is something brush against the tent. If you've ever run your finger along a tent, then you know the distinctive sound it makes. At this point, everyone else had noticed this too, and the tent goes silent like you could hear a pin drop. It stayed silent for about 2 minutes. Now, if you've ever been in a situation like this, the silence is deafening, and it feels like breaking the silence will have dire consequences. My friend then says, "Did you guys hear that?" We all say yes. "Well, what was it?" I say branch or something, because I really didn't know what to say, but I wanted to say something. We stick our heads out the tent, and once again, there was nothing. I was certain someone was out there though. I just got that gut feeling you get. You know, when you know, and I felt like I knew. The tent was in the middle of the woods, but it was inside a clearing, and there was no branches anywhere near close enough to have touched the tent. Also, there was no paths, so nobody would have any reason to be nearby. We carry on believing that we're all going mad, then out of nowhere, something hit the tent pretty hard. We all gasp and back up to the side of the tent opposite of the opening. Not that it would have done any good, because you know, it's a tent. I realize something is definitely up and grab the bat we used to hit the pegs in. I can't remember what my friend said, but I remember it being something to do with it could be our friends that left pranking us. That put me at ease, and I agreed. So me and my friend left the tent laughing and asking our friends to show themselves, but no one did. I found this really weird because, you know, it was like the jig was up and they had their scare. I walked over to the next door and told my friend who was in there with his girlfriend that the other guys had come back and they're pranking us, so don't be shocked if they do anything weird and they were just being assholes. He agreed that it was likely. We went back into the tent. Then my friend in the tent next door, which was only a few yards away, said he was going for a piss and if he could borrow the flashlight. I threw it outside the tent and carried on talking to the others. About a minute later, he pops his head in and asks for the flashlight again. I told him I just threw it out there for him, but he said he didn't see where it went because he was throwing clothes on while inside the tent. We assumed the flashlight had rolled away, so we had a little look, but we didn't find anything. I found this really weird because there wasn't anywhere for it to go. The ground was fairly level, and I couldn't see it rolling anywhere. Not to mention, it was bright green and would have obviously stood out. so I lent my friend the lantern and said to be quick because we would have no light, and I didn't like the idea of no light considering things were getting really weird. I tried to convince him to piss without the lantern, but he wasn't having it. He walks off, and we carry on talking. The next minute, my friend sticks his head back in the tent and says, "Hey, I'm not fucking kidding, but there's a guy out there." I thought he was fucking around, but I panicked because if it was our friends pranking us, surely we would have heard them laughing or something by now. I stuck my head outside the tent and no one was there. But my friend said he was standing just beyond the tree line and my friend looked fucking scared, so I took his word at this point. The girls were panicking and I really did not know what to do at this point. We whispered amongst ourselves who should go and asked this guy what he was doing here, so we agreed that 3 of us would go. We took the little bat and walked to the tree line, and sure enough, this guy was just standing there. He had long messy hair and a beard, but was slim and dressed in camo gear. My friend asked what he was doing here, to which he replied in a weird and blank manner, "Walking." We asked why he was walking in the middle of nowhere and if he had been by our tents, to which he replied, "Them tents ain't yours." This guy was fucking weird, and he was creepy as anything, just his expression. He then walked off into the woods, and we decided we should leave. But it was dark, and it would be hard finding a way out of here with only a lantern. We all decided to sit on it, so we all got in my tent to wait it out. About 2 hours passed, and we couldn't sleep. Next minute, I hear an unzipping noise, and this fucking creeped me out because it was coming from my friend's tent and we were all in my tent. Everyone starts whispering, "What the fuck is that noise?" Me and my friend stick our heads out the tent and there's nothing there, so we all decide to go and look. We all walk over to the tent and my friend gasps and says, "We need to fucking go." I walked around to the other side of the tent and it's been slashed open corner to corner. From behind and inside the tent was the little green flashlight. Now this made me freak out because A, we knew this guy wasn't playing around. He just slashed an expensive tent, and B, he had something sharp to cut the tent fast without it tearing. We walked back over to the other tent and got the girls and most of our stuff, and we all left. We started walking towards the road through the woods. The most fucked up thing about this is every so often you could repeatedly hear like whispering, but rapidly and repetitive, but not too loud enough to figure out where exactly it was coming from or what it was saying. It felt like an eternity. This guy could have been anywhere. After about 35 minutes, we get to the road and follow the road home because we didn't want to tell our parents we had been drinking, and walking home takes like 2 hours, and we were looking behind us the whole way. The next day, we went back and our tents are gone. Now, I don't know if this was a coincidence or not, but a few weeks later, someone we knew from school got chased by a weird guy wielding a knife not far from where we camped. So he must have been crazy or something, rather than it being a drug-related thing. This really fucked me up for a good while. I stopped camping, and the only other times I've been camping is like festivals where there are other people. I am by no means a coward, but this guy was obviously crazy, and crazy people do crazy things. This happened about 6 years ago. If I'm remembering the year correctly, I'm pretty sure I was 11 at the time. It was time for my first ever overnight stay at a summer camp, and I was feeling pretty excited. This particular camp had a system where it normally functioned as a day camp, but there was one night each week where kids would stay overnight. I was a socially awkward kid, so I had avoided these overnight stays as much as possible, but this one time, I decided to be brave. It was only after I did that I did regret it. So before I explain what happened, I'll briefly give an outline of the camp. It was situated near the shore of an isolated lake, which had a few houses on it. My camping group decided to take advantage of that and agreed to set up a few feet from the shore. It was in a small clearing located near a small path. So flash forward to nighttime. We've set up our tents and sleeping bags. I'm in a large tent with 3 other boys, sitting a few feet off from the path that ran through the clearing. We whisper amongst ourselves, talk about the best camping activities, crushes, the nicest counselors, usual summer camp stuff. We were just about to say goodnight when we hear the faint hum of a motor coming from the lake. It's unusual for people to be out late at night on a motorboat on a small isolated lake, but we initially blow it off as being some person fishing. However, the noises begin to grow louder, and I begin to hear what sounds like drunk people cackling. This isn't scary for me. I assume it's just drunk people having some late night summer fun, and my tent mates agree. We try to ignore it, but we started getting nervous when the cackling and chatter quieted. I hear the engine shut off, and it sounds like the people were quietly disembarking at the camp's fishing dock, which was a few hundred feet away. For a couple of minutes after, I hear total silence. We were terrified. 2 of my tent mates are completely still, while the other is fidgeting and shaking. Looking back on it, it wasn't like this was even especially scary, but something felt distinctly off about the whole situation. My gut instincts were right. I start hearing slow, methodical footsteps, creeping slowly along the path. It's now clear that the intruder is intent on being as quiet as possible, but it's really easy to hear someone walking in a forest full of sticks, mud, and leaves. I'm listening to their steps as they approach our campsite at a painfully slow pace, when suddenly they stop and grunt. At this point, it's clear that it's a man and not a person who should be here. The man stands for what feels like an eternity before he begins to move again, but the sounds I hear are terrifying. That's when we realize he's moving towards my tent. All my tent mates are lying completely still, mortified, but not moving a muscle. He approaches our tent, walking right up to it so that we can see the silhouette of his legs outlined by the faint moonlight. He stands there for another few seconds, then places his finger on the tent. He then drags it across the tent, then begins to walk. The man traces the entire perimeter of the tent with one finger. He holds it there for a few seconds after, then grunts again and slowly walks to another tent. My tent mates are terrified, and we're all looking at each other like deer in headlights. We hear him move from one tent to another and walking around each one, with each trace feeling like it took longer than the last. Finally, he walks slowly back to the path, grunts once more, and walks away quickly in the direction he came. A few minutes later, I hear the motor of the boat starting up before hearing the sound fade into the distance. The counselors, who slept through the whole ordeal, were convinced that we were faking the incident to prank them. Those of us who reported it to them were ignored, and that is something I hold against the camp to this day. I still don't know what happened to the other people on the boat, where they went, or why one of them even came to our campsite in the first place. This happened back in 2012 when I was 15. There's a youth center in my city that used to do annual camping trips to Sweden. Me and my two friends, Sarah and Michelle, decided to go. The campground was set with an office and a kiosk at the entrance, and all of the caravans and tents behind it. In front of the office was a giant parking lot that you would have to cross to get to the showers and bathrooms. The office was located in the corner, and the bathrooms were in the opposite corner furthest away. There were 3 male teachers with us on this trip, all of them in their mid-20s. Every day, they would take us to the supermarket nearby in case we wanted something that the kiosk didn't sell. While we were in line to pay, we noticed a guy, probably in his early 20s. He was dressed in black cargo pants, big leather boots, and a leather jacket, despite it being 30 degrees. But the most noticeable thing about him was his hair, or lack thereof. He had no hair, no eyebrows, and no eyelashes. He looked like he had gone through chemotherapy. We kind of felt sorry for him because he was so young, and we talked about him on our way back to the campsite. When we got back, we hung out a bit just chilling in the lake before we went to the kiosk to buy something to drink. That's when we saw the guy again. We just thought it was a coincidence, even though there wasn't that many people on the campsite. He could very well just be living there. Later that afternoon, Sarah had to use the bathroom, and because it was so far away and slightly deserted, me and Michelle went with her. There was a bench and a table just outside the cabin that held the bathrooms, and guess who was sitting there? The same guy from earlier. He was sitting there with 3 friends, 2 girls and a guy, and when we got close enough, he stood up and looked like he wanted to say something. Sarah and Michelle, who have always been a bit paranoid, speeded up and went into the bathroom, but I hung back a bit and asked him if he wanted anything. He looked after my friends and started shaking his head no and sat back down. I kind of stood there for a couple of seconds because he looked so sad before joining my friends. Me and Michelle sat in the changing room adjacent to the bathroom, and after a couple of minutes, one of the girls from outside came in and she started talking to us in Swedish. Even though our languages are similar to each other, it can still be hard to understand, so we spent a couple of minutes explaining that we weren't Swedish before she started speaking broken English. She told us that her friend, the bald guy, was very shy, and if we just wanted to go speak with him for a couple of minutes. Now, we were 3 girls in a foreign country, and he was at least a couple years older than us. We really didn't want to speak with him, and we told her this. She was talking with us for more than 20 minutes. In the beginning, she just wanted us to speak with him. Then she wanted one of us to go in the tent with him. Then she asked us to sleep with him. At this point, she was very frantic and kept switching from Swedish to English, so it was really hard to understand. But she said in Swedish, "You just need to sleep with him. If you won't do it with him, he'll do it to me." At this point, Sarah was finally done on the bathroom and came out to see what was happening. The girl looked like she was about to cry and left the room. Sarah wanted to see who it was, so we all looked out the little window, and I'm so glad we did. We saw the girl say something to the guy. He looked over at the bathroom door, slammed his fist on the table, and walked over to the door. We really didn't know what to do because he was blocking the only exit, so we all went into the little bathroom and locked the door. We heard the guy knocking on the door to the change room, and we all held our breaths. After a while, he knocked again, but we still kept quiet, not even moving. After a while, we heard the door open, but he was clearly trying to be quiet. He slowly walked towards the bathroom door, and all I could hear was the heavy sounds of his boots on the floor. He sat down just outside the door and just sat there. For 45 minutes, we could hear his heavy breathing on the other side of the door. For those 45 minutes, we didn't care how much noise we made. He already knew we were in there. We tried to find the number for the Swedish police, but we didn't have any service on our phones because we were in a different country and we didn't have our teachers' numbers, so we couldn't call them. So we just sat there, panicking for the most part. Suddenly he got up, kicked the door, and walked outside again. We were dead quiet and didn't move for another 10 minutes. We were scared he was trying to lure us out. All of a sudden, the door opened again, and we could hear someone fumbling with something, either keys or some tools. We were afraid that he had found something to open the door with, but then we remembered that there was this little box that you would put money in to get the shower started. We asked who it was, and someone responded with the janitor or something. I don't know. I was kind of in shock, so I didn't really listen properly. We took a chance and slowly opened the door, ready to close it again quickly if it was him. The man on the other side wasn't the same guy though. He was at least 60. We asked him if he saw the other guy, and he told us that he had told him to leave and that he had seen him leave the girls' changing room. We thanked the man and started walking towards the office. We were met with the owner, and she quickly got our teachers there. We were all very shocked, so it was hard to get the words out of us, but in the end, we managed to tell our teachers what had happened. All of the teachers were outraged, and 2 of them immediately left to see if they could find the guy. That night, the police came to talk with us, but unfortunately, the police never found the guy. But we discovered that the 2 teachers that went to look for him did find him. We overheard a conversation between the teachers, and apparently they had threatened him so bad he almost cried. I understand why. The teachers were both quite tall and strong. For the longest time after this event, I still get the creeps every time I see a bald guy.